At family reunion, my husband's parents told me to stay out of the group photos. You'll fit right in, Olivia. They're going to love you. Those were Ryan's words the first time he brought me home to meet his family. I remember the way his fingers intertwined with mine as we pulled up to the Whitmore estate, an architectural masterpiece of glass and steel overlooking the Pacific. My own family's modest two-bedroom in Oakland suddenly felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The Whitmores weren't just wealthy, they were a dynasty. 3 generations of building Whitmore Luxe into what business magazines called the definitive luxury lifestyle brand of the West Coast. Their logo, a sleek, silver W with a crown, adorned everything from high-end resorts to limited edition watches. And here I was, Olivia Chin, the graphic designer from a community college, about to meet the family that owned it all. Diane Whitmore, Ryan's mother, greeted me with an air kiss that never quite reached my cheek. "So nice to finally meet you," she said, her eyes performing a swift assessment. I knew what she saw. My off-the-rack dress, my sensible shoes, my lack of pedigree. That night set the pattern for the next 2 years. Fancy dinners where I sat quietly while conversations about boarding schools I'd never heard of flowed around me. Charity galas where I was introduced as Ryan's wife, instead of by name. Board members who would look through me as if I were made of glass. I did try. God knows I tried. "You know, I've been looking at your website and social media platforms," I said 6 months after the wedding. "I think I could help refresh your digital presence. Your demographics are shifting younger, but your marketing strategy hasn't adapted." Victor Whitmore, Ryan's father, raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" I pulled out my tablet, eager to show them the mock-ups I'd spent weeks preparing. "You're just a graphic designer, sweetie," Diane cut in, placing her hand over mine. "We have professionals for that." "Mother," Ryan began, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, I'm serious," I persisted. "Their last 3 quarterly reports show declining engagement. I could help turn that around." "Actually," Ryan said, surprising everyone, "maybe we should listen to Olivia. Her agency did win that award for the Bergman campaign." "Fine," Diane said finally. "Show us what you've got. But don't get your hopes up." That night, Ryan and I argued in our car. "You know how they are," he said, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You can't just waltz in and tell them how to run the business they've built over 3 generations." "I wasn't telling them how to run it," I replied, tears stinging my eyes. "I was offering to help." Ryan sighed. "Look, I'm on your side, but they think you're trying to use me to get ahead in your career." The words hit me like a slap. "Is that what you think too?" "No, of course not." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I know who you are, Olivia. But they don't. Not yet. Give them time." So I gave them time, and I got to work. Ryan gave me access to their digital analytics. What I found was worse than I thought. Whitmore Luxe wasn't just struggling online, they were hemorrhaging relevance. Their website looked outdated. Their social media was a graveyard of corporate speak. I started small. Late nights after my regular job, weekends when Ryan was golfing with his father. I redesigned the logo to maintain its heritage while making it pop on smaller screens. I overhauled their content strategy, emphasizing storytelling over sales pitches. 3 months later, online engagement had tripled. Sales from digital channels were up 22%. A fashion influencer with millions of followers had spontaneously raved about the amazing rebrand of Whitmore Luxe. "It seems our digital team is finally earning their keep," Victor commented at dinner. I bit my tongue and stared at my plate. "Actually, Dad," Ryan said, placing his hand on mine, "that was all Olivia. She's been rebuilding our entire digital presence." For a brief moment, I saw something I'd never seen on Diane Whitmore's face. Surprise. "Is that so?" Victor leaned forward. "Without authorization?" "I gave her access," Ryan admitted.
"Well,
"How enterprising of you, Olivia," Diane said. The word dripped with subtext I couldn't miss. Opportunistic, overreaching, inappropriate. "Just trying to help the family," I said quietly. "Well, if you have any other suggestions, perhaps you could run them by our actual marketing team first?" We wouldn't want any crossed wires. The message was clear: know your place. But the numbers didn't lie. By the end of the year, Whitmore Luxe had reversed its downward trajectory. The press was intrigued, and suddenly the Whitmores were being hailed as visionaries who had successfully captured the millennial luxury market. Not once did my name appear in any press materials. "It's just business, Liv," Ryan explained when I showed him an article that credited the company's forward-thinking leadership for the turnaround. "The brand is what matters, not individual contributors." "I'm not asking to be on the cover of Forbes," I said. "But would it finish them to acknowledge that their daughter-in-law played a part?" Over the next year, I quietly expanded my role. When their events coordinator quit, I stepped in temporarily. When their supply chain faced delays, I stayed up 3 nights finding alternatives. I became the invisible hand, solving problems before they reached the boardroom. The company flourished. Profits soared. My marriage, however, began to show cracks. Ryan's gratitude gradually transformed into expectation. My suggestions, once treated as brilliant insights, became routine contributions. And then came the family comeback article in Luxury Business Quarterly, a 6-page spread featuring the entire Whitmore clan, celebrating their triumphant return to the top of the luxury market. I learned about it when my mother sent me the link. "Why aren't you in the photos?" she asked. There they were: Ryan, Victor, Diane, Ryan's sister Amanda, and her husband, even Victor's mother in her wheelchair. The whole family, beaming with pride. I wasn't in a single shot. When I confronted Ryan, his expression was pained but not surprised. "The publicist thought it would be cleaner to just have blood family," he explained. "It's just PR strategy, Liv. It doesn't mean anything." But it did mean everything. That night, I made my first anonymous call to Gregory Maxwell, the venture capitalist who had been trying to get a stake in Whitmore Luxe for years. "I might have a proposition for you," I said when he answered. "About Whitmore Luxe." "Who is this?" he demanded. "Someone who knows exactly how to take Whitmore Luxe into the next decade. And someone who's tired of not being seen." "Another record quarter," Victor announced at the executive boardroom, his voice booming with pride. "Whitmore Luxe is officially back on top." I sat in the corner of the room, laptop open, officially there to take notes, but in reality managing the entire digital presentation Victor was taking credit for. 3 projectors displayed graphs of our market growth, customer acquisition, and revenue streams, all designed by me at 2 a.m. the night before. The repositioning of our heritage line for younger demographics was particularly inspired, Diane added, nodding to the marketing director who hadn't contributed a single idea to the campaign. I watched silently as praise was distributed to everyone except me. This had become routine over the past year, ever since my digital overhaul had reversed the company's fortune. My role had expanded far beyond graphic design, but my recognition had somehow shrunk. "Our online conversion rate has jumped 40% since the website redesign," the marketing director noted, scrolling through my slides without mentioning who created them. Ryan caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, apologetic smile. Once, that would have been enough. Now, it just felt hollow. After the meeting, I slipped into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. I barely recognized myself anymore. Designer clothes replaced my old wardrobe, a necessary upgrade to fit the Whitmore image. My hair, once worn naturally curly, was now straightened into corporate submission. Even my voice had changed, softened to avoid seeming confrontational in meetings. "You're their backbone," I whispered to myself. "Without you, they'd collapse." I believed it too. In the 18 months since my digital renovation, I'd quietly expanded into every corner of Whitmore Luxe. When their app developer quit, I taught myself Swift and rebuilt it from scratch. When their flagship store redesign stalled, I spent weekends creating 3D renderings that the contractors now followed precisely. When their customer relationship management system crashed, I was the one who restored it while the tech team panicked. All without credit. All behind the scenes. "There you are," Ryan said, catching me in the hallway after the meeting. "Dad wants to have dinner tonight to celebrate. The Peninsula, 8 p.m. "I can't," I replied. "I have to finish the Q3 projection models." "Can't the analytics team handle that?" I laughed without humor. The analytics team is me, Ryan. The actual team just forwards everything to my inbox. His forehead creased. Since when? Since always. I sighed. But go. Celebrate. I'll work from home. He hesitated, then kissed my cheek. I'll bring you back dessert. That night, as Ryan dined with his family, I sat cross-legged on our bed surrounded by spreadsheets and market forecasts. The TV played in the background, a business channel interviewing Diane Whitmore about the remarkable turnaround of their family brand. We've always believed in evolving while honoring tradition, she said smoothly, wearing the earrings I had selected for her TV appearances. The Whitmore name stands for excellence, and that means recognizing when to innovate. I nearly threw my laptop when the host asked about the secret to their digital success. We've assembled an exceptional team, Diane replied. And of course, family leadership has been crucial. My son Ryan has really championed our online strategy. Ryan, who could barely upload a photo to Instagram without my help. When he came home that night, I was still working, fueled by a mix of caffeine and resentment. Mom was incredible on TV, he said, loosening his tie. Did you catch it? Hard to miss when she was taking credit for my entire digital strategy. Ryan sighed. Liv, you know how this works. She's the face of the company. And what am I? The invisible ghost who actually runs things. You're my wife, he said, as if that explained everything. We're a team. Teams share credit, Ryan. The next morning, I found an email from Victor requesting a complete overhaul of their upcoming seasonal campaign. Something fresh but timeless, he wrote. By Thursday. 2 days to recreate their entire quarterly strategy. I did it in one. Not because I wanted to impress them anymore, but because I knew I could. Because somewhere along the way, proving my worth had become an obsession. When I presented it to the executive team, Diane nodded appreciatively before turning to her assistant. Make sure the marketing department implements Olivia's suggestions. Actually, I said, voice steadier than I felt, I've already implemented them. The new campaign is live on all platforms as of this morning. The room fell silent. Without approval, Diane's voice had a dangerous edge. The numbers were projected to fall if we waited. I explained. First day engagement is already up 62%. After a long pause, Victor cleared his throat. Well, that's proactive. Let's see how it performs. It performed brilliantly. #Whitmore Renaissance trended on social media. Sales jumped. A major fashion publication requested an exclusive feature. 2 weeks later, the photographer from Luxury Lifestyle magazine arrived to capture the faces behind the Whitmore revival. I wore my best outfit and prepared to finally stand alongside my husband's family. Instead, I was asked to adjust the lighting, provide the scheduling, and essentially coordinate the entire photo shoot, only to be excluded from every frame. Media strategy, the PR director explained smoothly. We're focusing on the Whitmore legacy narrative. I watched as they posed, Ryan, his parents, his sister, smiling as if they'd built this success themselves. Not one of them looked back to where I stood holding the photographer's reflector. That night, I made my second call to Gregory Maxwell. How serious are you about gaining influence at Whitmore? I asked. Very serious, he replied. Why? Because I've identified several silent partners looking to sell their shares. 15% of the company could be available if someone moved quickly. And why would you tell me this? His voice was cautious. Let's just say I'm tired of being the silent backbone of a company that doesn't acknowledge my existence. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and logged into the system I'd built, the one that tracked every aspect of Whitmore Luxe's operations. I began downloading documents, projections, and strategies. Not to leak them, but to protect them. Because they weren't the company's ideas. They were mine. And soon, everyone would know it. The annual Whitmore family reunion was a legendary affair, meticulously planned to showcase the family's wealth and influence. This year's location, an exclusive vineyard estate in Napa Valley, had been secured a year in advance. 5-star chefs were flown in from Europe. Vintage wines worth more than my parents' house were uncorked with casual indifference. I had spent 3 months coordinating every detail of the event while pretending I wasn't. The invitations with hand-pressed gold leaf, my design sent under the event planner's name, the custom app that guests use to navigate the sprawling property, my code credited to the tech department, the personalized welcome gifts that earned gasps of delight, my concept attributed to Diane's impeccable taste. "You've outdone yourself," Ryan whispered as we arrived at the estate. Rows of grapevines stretched toward the mountains, bathed in golden California sunshine. The main house, a Tuscan-inspired villa with a terrace overlooking the valley, glowed like something from a fairy tale. "Just doing my part for the family," I replied, the word family tasting bitter on my tongue. Inside, 50 of the Whitmore's closest relatives, business associates, and social connections mingled over champagne. I recognized tech moguls, a state senator, and at least one minor European royal. The air buzzed with power and privilege. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease, playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. Yes, the roses are from a local grower. The wine is from the estate's private reserve. The chef trained under Alain Ducasse. All details I had personally arranged but would never claim credit for. Through it all, I maintained my smile while taking mental notes for my growing dossier. Which board members were drinking too much? Who was complaining about Victor's leadership? Which cousins felt overlooked in the family business? Information was power, and I was silently collecting it all. "There's my brilliant son," Victor called out, pulling Ryan into a conversation with investors. I wasn't invited to join them. Diane floated through the party like royalty, occasionally glancing my way to ensure I wasn't embarrassing the family name. Once, I caught her straightening my place card at the dinner table, moving it slightly further from the center of the family. "Just balancing the arrangement, dear," she said with a saccharine smile. The day progressed with the precision of a Swiss watch. Brunch on the terrace, wine tasting in the cellar, a tour of the vineyards, each moment designed to reinforce the Whitmore mystique. I played my part while watching Gregory Maxwell work the room. He arrived as the +1 of a distant Whitmore cousin, exactly as I had arranged. No one questioned his presence, especially when he mentioned his interest in the vineyard's expansion plans. "Quite the operation you've built," he remarked to Victor during the tasting, while subtly catching my eye across the room. Our plan was in motion. As sunset approached, the photographer I had hired began gathering everyone for the family photos. This was the tradition, the moment when the Whitmore dynasty documented its continuing legacy. These photos would be displayed in their homes, offices, and eventually, family history books. "Let's move to the terrace," the photographer called out. "We'll catch the golden hour light with the vineyard as backdrop." I stood beside Ryan as relatives assembled in their finest attire. Children were straightened, ties adjusted, lipstick reapplied. The photographer arranged people by height and relationship, creating the perfect composition. "Mrs. Whitmore," he called to Diane, "where would you like to stand?" Diane surveyed the group with the critical eye of a general arranging troops. Victor and I at center, of course. Ryan and Amanda flanking us. Grandchildren in front. I waited for my placement, smoothing my dress, a designer piece that had cost a month's salary from my old job. The photographer looked at his shot list. "And Mrs. Ryan Whitmore?" Before I could step forward, Diane turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Why don't you sit this one out, dear? Let's keep it blood family." The words hung in the air. Around us, conversation dimmed. Several relatives glanced away in embarrassment. I stood frozen, the shock of her words washing over me like ice water. In 2 years of calculated slights and subtle exclusions, this was the first time Diane had been so explicitly cruel. I turned to Ryan, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything, that would acknowledge the insult. He looked at me, then at his mother, conflict written across his face. "Mom," he began weakly. "It's just for the main portrait," Diane continued smoothly. "We'll do plenty of casual shots later with everyone." Ryan's shoulders slumped in defeat. "We can take some together afterward," he told me quietly. In that moment, something inside me hardened permanently. Not just toward Diane, but toward my husband. His silence was a betrayal more painful than anything his mother could deliver. "Of course," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I understand completely." I stepped back, feeling dozens of eyes on me as I retreated from the family formation. No one protested. No one followed me. They simply rearranged to fill the space where I had been standing. "Perfect," the photographer called out. "Now smile, everyone." And they did. They smiled their perfect Whitmore smiles while I watched from the sidelines. The golden California sun cast them in a glow that made them look like figures from a Renaissance painting. Beautiful, timeless, untouchable. From my position on the periphery, I saw what no one else could. Gregory Maxwell slipping away from the gathering, phone to his ear, making the calls I had instructed him to make, setting in motion the financial maneuvers that would change everything. When the formal portraits were finished, guests dispersed for cocktails before dinner. Ryan approached me, guilt written across his features. "Liv, I'm sorry. You know how she gets about family traditions." I smiled, a new smile I had never used before. "Don't worry about it. I'm not." "You're not upset? Why would I be?" I asked, my voice light. "It's just a photo." Relief flooded his face, misreading my calm for acceptance. "Exactly. Just a photo." But it wasn't just a photo. It was the final confirmation of what I had always known but refused to accept. I would never be truly part of this family. No matter what I contributed, no matter how I transformed myself, I would always be the outsider. As we walked to dinner, my phone vibrated with a text from Gregory. "First acquisition complete. 12% secured." I slipped the phone back into my purse and took my seat at the table, at the far end, naturally. I raised my glass during Victor's toast to family legacy and bloodlines that define us. I smiled and nodded and played the perfect daughter-in-law for the last time. Because what they didn't know is that while they posed for their precious family portrait, I had already set the chessboard in motion. They had their legacy. I would have justice. 6 months before the family reunion, I had reached my breaking point. It was a Tuesday evening when I found myself alone in the Whitmore Lux headquarters, staring at quarterly projections I had single-handedly improved by 32%. The building was empty except for the cleaning staff. Ryan had texted that he wouldn't be home until late, another essential dinner with his father and potential investors. I wandered through the silent executive floor, my heels clicking on marble floors that had been selected by Diane to project permanence. My fingers trailed along the wall of photographs, 3 generations of Whitmores marking their achievements. Not a single image contained my face. That's when I made my decision. The next morning, I created an encrypted email account at a coffee shop 3 cities away from our home. Using public Wi-Fi and a burner phone purchased with cash, I sent a message to Gregory Maxwell, the notorious venture capitalist who had been circling Whitmore Lux for years. Possible discussion regarding insider perspective on Whitmore Lux opportunities. Confidential only. Maxwell responded within 15 minutes. Our first meeting took place in a private dining room at a restaurant where no one from the Whitmore circle would ever set foot. Too new, too trendy, too lacking in old money credentials. I arrived wearing a wig and sunglasses, feeling ridiculous until I saw Maxwell take similar precautions, entering through the kitchen. "You understand why I'm skeptical," he said after the waiter left us alone. A mysterious insider wanting to talk about one of the most closed-door family businesses in the industry. I placed a USB drive on the table. 6 months of internal projections, board meeting minutes, and design plans for the next 3 product launches. Consider it a gesture of good faith. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the files on his laptop. "This is comprehensive." "I'm not comprehensive, I'm thorough." I leaned forward. "You've been trying to get a foothold in Whitmore Lux for what? 3 years now." 4, he corrected. Victor Whitmore would rather burn the company to the ground than let an outsider like me in. "What if I told you there's a way for both of us to get what we want?" Maxwell studied me with new interest. "I'm listening." My proposition was simple but bold. If Maxwell helped me acquire enough shares to gain meaningful influence within Whitmore Lux, I would give him exclusive access to the company's expansion plans and international strategy, areas where his investment firm excelled. "Why would you do this?" he asked, suspicious. "You're married to the heir apparent." Being married to Ryan Whitmore and being respected by the Whitmores are two very different things, I replied. Let's just say I'm tired of being the girl with a laptop instead of the girl with a voice. Over the next 4 months, our partnership solidified. While I continued improving Whitmore Lux from within, Maxwell and I identified vulnerable points in their shareholder structure. The company had gone semi-public 15 years earlier, but retained 63% ownership within the family. The remaining 37% was distributed among silent partners, private equity firms, and minor shareholders, many of whom had little emotional attachment to the Whitmore name. Whitmore stock is undervalued, I explained during one of our clandestine meetings. The market doesn't know about the Asia expansion or the luxury hotel licensing deals I've been developing. When those announce, shares will surge. So we buy now before the surge. Exactly. But not you directly. We need shell companies, proxies, diversified purchasing patterns. Maxwell smiled. You've thought this through. I've had 2 years of being invisible to consider my options. We moved carefully. A 2% acquisition through a retirement fund liquidation. Another 3% from a disgruntled former executive. Small packages from minor shareholders who didn't recognize the company's potential under its new direction, my direction. I funneled my personal savings, everything I'd earned before and during my marriage, into the venture. When Ryan questioned the disappearance of my inheritance from my grandmother, I told him I was investing in our future. I wasn't lying. By the time of the family reunion, Maxwell and I had secured 21% of Whitmore Lux through various channels. Not enough for control, but enough to be heard. The remaining shares we needed were held by a private equity group that had been pressing Victor for better returns for years. They're asking 17% above market value, Maxwell reported during a hurried call from the vineyard bathroom. Pay it, I said without hesitation. After the family reunion, we moved to phase 2. The humiliation on the terrace, being told to sit out the family photo, wasn't just painful. It was clarifying. As I watched the Whitmores pose without me, I realized I'd been playing the wrong game all along. I wasn't fighting for acceptance. I was fighting for power. And now I had it. The morning after the reunion, while Ryan was still asleep, I slipped out to meet Maxwell at a roadside diner 40 miles from the vineyard. Congratulations, he said, sliding a folder across the table. You now own or control 38% of Whitmore Lux. Add the sympathetic board members you've identified, and you have effective control. I traced my fingers over the documents, feeling a strange mix of vindication and vertigo. And the proxy statement is ready. Filed this morning. At the quarterly board meeting next week, Shell Company XLT, which is actually you, will exercise its voting rights and present its representative. Me, I said, the word feeling powerful on my tongue. You, he confirmed, though I admit, I'm still not clear on your endgame. Are you planning to sell? Take the company in a new direction? Force them to acknowledge your contributions? I sipped my coffee, considering the question. When I was 7, my mother took me to see the Whitmore flagship store opening in San Francisco. I remember pressing my face against the window, watching Diane cut the ribbon. My mother told me, that's what success looks like. I set down my cup. I'm not interested in acknowledgement anymore. I want to show them what success really looks like. Back at the vineyard, as families prepared to depart, I played the perfect daughter-in-law one last time. I helped coordinate departures, accepted air kisses from relatives who had watched my humiliation without comment, and smiled politely when Diane mentioned next year's reunion. Looking forward to it. I lied. On the drive home, Ryan reached for my hand. Thanks for being so understanding about the photo thing. Mom just gets traditional about family stuff. I intertwined my fingers with his, wondering if he could feel how much had changed. I understand completely. That's why I love you, he said, kissing my knuckles. You don't get caught up in family. I turned to look out the window, hiding my expression. No, I don't get caught up in them. I transform them. Over the next week, I maintained my routine. I continued improving Whitmore Lux's operations. I prepared the quarterly presentation that Victor would claim as his work. I even helped Diane select a new artwork for the company lobby, something that captures the Whitmore legacy. But at night, I prepared for war. I rehearsed my speech before the board. I selected my outfit. Not a demure dress, but a power suit in Whitmore blue. I memorized financial figures that would demonstrate exactly how much value I had added to the company. The night before the board meeting, Ryan found me practicing in front of our bathroom mirror. "Big presentation tomorrow?" he asked, wrapping his arms around my waist. "The biggest?" I replied, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "It might change everything." "You'll be amazing," he said, completely missing my meaning. "Just like always." I turned and kissed him, wondering if it would be our last kiss as things were. "Yes," I agreed. "But this time, everyone will notice." The quarterly board meeting of Whitmore Lux always followed the same choreography. The oak-paneled boardroom would fill with the same 20 people. Victor would sit at the head of the massive table, Diane to his right, Ryan to his left. Senior executives would arrange themselves by seniority. I would quietly take my place in the corner, laptop ready, expected to be both invisible and indispensable. But not today. I arrived 30 minutes early, before anyone else. I placed my nameplate. Newly created, heavy crystal with Olivia Chen Whitmore, engraved in elegant script, at the head of the table. I arranged copies of the documents I'd prepared at each seat. Then I took Victor's chair and waited. Marcus, the chief financial officer, arrived first. He nodded absently in my direction before noticing my position. "That's not your usual spot," he said, frowning. "No," I agreed pleasantly. "It's not." He hovered uncertainly, then chose a seat midway down the table. Others trickled in, each reaction a variation on confused concern. The marketing director whispered to the head of operations. The legal counsel checked his phone with unusual intensity. No one directly questioned me. At precisely 9:58, 2 minutes before the scheduled start, Victor and Diane entered, followed by Ryan. Victor stopped short when he saw me in his chair. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," he said, his voice strained with forced joviality. "Olivia, the assistants sit along the wall." "I'm not here as an assistant today, Victor." Diane's perfectly maintained smile flickered. "Is this some kind of joke? Why don't you take your seats?" I gestured to the places I'd arranged for them, halfway down the table. "We have a full agenda." Ryan stepped forward, his face a mask of confusion. "Liv, what are you doing?" "Business, Ryan. Please sit." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Victor's face darkened from pink to crimson. "This is outrageous. I am the CEO of this company and the head of this family." He slammed his hand on the table. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now." I smiled, feeling strangely calm. "Actually, Victor, I'm afraid the games have already ended." I glanced at my watch. Right on cue, the boardroom door opened and Gregory Maxwell entered, followed by our attorneys. "Sorry I'm late," Maxwell said, though he was precisely on time. "Traffic was terrible." Diane gasped. "What is he doing here?" "Victor, did you invite this vulture?" "I invited him," I said, standing. As the representative of XLT Holdings, which now controls 38% of Whitmore Lux. The room erupted. Victor shouted for security. Diane accused me of betrayal. Board members whispered urgently to each other. Through it all, Ryan stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Everyone, please," I called out, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Take your seats. Our attorneys will verify everything I'm about to tell you." Slowly, reluctantly, they complied. Victor remained standing, hands braced on the table. "This is impossible," he seethed. "No outside entity could acquire that much of our company without our knowledge." "That's where you're wrong," I replied. "For 2 years, I've watched you ignore financial vulnerabilities because you were too proud to acknowledge them. I identified them. I exploited them. just as I identified and exploited your operational weaknesses to save this company while you took the credit. I opened the presentation folder before me and activated the room's display screens. Charts appeared showing Whitmore Lux's performance over the past 2 years, overlaid with timestamps of my interventions and the resulting improvements. Digital engagement up 215%. Customer retention improved by 44%. Millennial market penetration increased by 76%. I advanced through the slides. All initiatives I designed, implemented, and managed, usually after being told I wasn't qualified or wasn't family enough to have a real voice. The board members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with the Whitmores. Now, with the additional support of these board members, I nodded to 3 directors who had privately assured me of their votes. XLT Holdings has effective control of Whitmore Lux. Diane found her voice. This is absurd. Who even is XLT Holdings? Some corporate raider Maxwell dug up. I smiled. XLT stands for Shaolin Trust, my grandmother's family name. I am XLT Holdings, Diane. The silence that followed was absolute. That's not possible, Ryan finally said. You don't have that kind of money. I invested everything I had. Maxwell helped with the financing. And I leveraged the one thing you all believed I didn't have, knowledge. I turned to the board. I know this company better than anyone in this room because I was the one actually running it for the past year. Victor's face had gone from red to ashen. What do you want? Money? Recognition? Is this some elaborate tantrum because you weren't in a family photo? I want what I've earned, I replied evenly. Starting with your chair, Victor. I motioned to our attorney, who distributed the formal resolutions. The first vote will be on the restructuring of the executive leadership team. I moved to replace Victor Whitmore as CEO and chairman, effective immediately. The vote was swift and decisive. Years of Victor's high-handed treatment of the board had left him with few allies. When combined with my shares and proxy votes, the outcome was inevitable. Victor Whitmore was removed as CEO by a vote of 14-6. I was installed as his replacement by the same margin. Diane clutched her husband's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. You can't do this. The Whitmore name means something. Our customers expect a Whitmore at the helm. And they'll have one, I replied calmly. Olivia Chin Whitmore. Unless, of course, Ryan plans to divorce me over this. All eyes turned to my husband, who looked as though he'd been struck. Olivia, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have chosen me over your family, Ryan? Over your position? Over the Whitmore legacy? I held his gaze. Think carefully before you answer. His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said softly, then turned back to the board. Now, our second order of business is a comprehensive PR strategy acknowledging who has actually been responsible for Whitmore Lux's recent success. The new plan was revealed. Interviews, profiles, a brand campaign centered on the woman who revitalized an American legacy. My face would appear alongside the Whitmore name. My story would become part of the brand narrative. My contributions would be acknowledged in every press release. By the time we adjourned, 3 hours later, the power structure of Whitmore Lux had been completely transformed. I sat at the head of the table, surrounded by allies. Victor and Diane had stormed out midway through, their threats of legal action dismissed by our attorneys. Most of the board members seemed relieved by the change, already adapting to the new reality. Ryan remained in his seat, silent and stunned. As everyone filed out, he finally approached me. Was any of it real? He asked, his voice hollow. Us? Our marriage? I met his eyes. I loved you, Ryan. I still do. But I refused to keep loving someone who wouldn't stand up for me, who watched his family erase me and said nothing. So what happens now? I gathered my papers into my new executive briefcase, a gift from Gregory Maxwell with CEO monogrammed on the side. Now, you decide which matters more, your family name or your marriage. You decide if you can handle being Mr. Olivia Chun instead of me being Mrs. Ryan Whitmore. I headed for the door, then paused. I'll be staying at the Four Seasons until you figure it out. The company is hosting a rebranding gala there next week. I hope you'll attend, as my husband." I left him standing in the boardroom, surrounded by the wreckage of his family's empire and the blueprints of mine. The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons glittered with the who's who of the luxury industry. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the crowd while waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and canapes. A 12-piece orchestra played softly in the corner. Above the stage hung the new Whitmore Luxe logo, the familiar crown and W, now accompanied by a subtle but unmistakable OC, integrated into the design. This was my night, the official unveiling of Whitmore Luxe's new direction. I stood at the entrance, greeting guests in a gown I had designed myself, Whitmore blue with geometric gold accents that echoed the new brand patterns. The press lines stretched down the corridor, each reporter eager for an exclusive with the mystery woman who saved Whitmore Luxe, as Forbes had dubbed me in their rush-released digital cover. "Ms. Chun Whitmore, how does it feel to step into the spotlight after working behind the scenes for so long?" called out a reporter from Luxury Daily. "It feels like finally wearing clothes that fit," I replied with a smile. "Comfortable because it's authentic." The media had devoured the story of my ascension, the outsider who transformed a failing legacy brand while being denied credit, only to emerge as its savior. The narrative was irresistible, especially with Diane's hasty resignation providing the perfect villainous counterpoint. She had lasted 3 days after the board meeting before sending a terse email announcing her retirement to focus on family. The translation was clear. She couldn't bear to serve under me. Victor had followed suit, though with less dignity, a rambling press statement about hostile corporate actions that most outlets buried beneath glamorous photos of me touring Whitmore's flagship stores. Gregory Maxwell appeared at my elbow, resplendent in a tuxedo. "The Wall Street Journal is calling it the smoothest hostile takeover in luxury market history," he murmured, handing me a flute of champagne. "Stocks up 22% since the announcement. And the Asian expansion?" I asked quietly. "Contracts signed this morning. Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore. Just as you projected." I nodded, satisfaction flowing through me. "And the personal matter we discussed?" "Handled. The real estate agent has the keys to the guest house. It's been renovated according to your specifications." The guest house on the Whitmore estate, now my estate, had been transformed into a self-contained residence. A place for Ryan, should he choose to stay married to me without living directly under my roof. A compromise between divorce and forgiveness. I hadn't seen or spoken to my husband in the 8 days since the takeover. His only communication had been a text. "I need time." I had given him time, space, and options. Tonight would reveal his decision. As if conjured by my thoughts, a stir at the entrance caught my attention. Ryan had arrived, wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo and an unreadable expression. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment, everything else faded away. He looked different somehow, less the pampered air and more the man I had fallen in love with years ago. He moved through the crowd with purpose, nodding at acquaintances, but never breaking eye contact with me. When he reached me, he didn't speak. Instead, he took my hand and raised it to his lips, a gesture both formal and intimate. "You look beautiful," he said finally. "Thank you for coming," I replied, aware of the cameras capturing our reunion. I wouldn't miss my wife's big night. He hesitated. "If I'm still your husband." Before I could respond, the event director appeared at my side. "Ms. Chun Whitmore, we're ready for your speech and the official portrait." I nodded. "We'll continue this conversation later," I told Ryan, then headed for the stage. Standing at the podium, I surveyed the room filled with industry leaders, influencers, and media. The crowd that had once looked through me now hung on my every word. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Whitmore Luxe has always been about legacy," I began. "About creating something that endures beyond a single generation. Tonight, we're not just celebrating a new chapter for this company. We're celebrating a fundamental truth, that legacy isn't about bloodlines. It's about vision, about recognizing value, wherever and whoever it comes from." My speech wove the story of Whitmore's heritage with my own journey, positioning the company's future as a fusion of tradition and innovation. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. And now, I concluded, I'd like to gather the Whitmore Lux executive team for our official portrait. The new leadership team assembled on stage, talented professionals I had elevated based on merit rather than connections. As we arranged ourselves before the photographer, I made a split-second decision. "Ryan," I called out, "you should be in this too." Surprise flickered across his face before he joined us, standing beside me as cameras flashed. His hand found the small of my back, a gesture of support, not possession. The photographer captured the moment, me at the center, poised and confident, Ryan beside me, his expression a complex mix of pride and humility, our new team surrounding us, representing the company's transformed identity. Later, as the gala wound down, Ryan and I found a quiet moment on the hotel terrace overlooking the city. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about choosing between my family name and my marriage. And I kept my voice neutral, though my heart raced. I chose wrong before. When I said nothing at the reunion, when I let them push you aside. I chose wrong, and I'm sorry." He took a deep breath. "I've spent the past week clearing out my office at the old headquarters, returning my company car, moving my things to the guest house. So you're staying? If you'll have me." He met my gaze directly, not as the heir to Whitmore, but as the husband of Olivia Chin Whitmore. "On your terms." I studied his face, searching for the entitled boy I'd married. Instead, I found a man humbled by consequences, facing a new reality with unexpected grace. "It won't be easy," I warned. "Your mother has already refused my calls. Your father is talking about legal action." "I know, but they'll adjust eventually. Or they won't." He shrugged. "Either way, I'm not making the same mistake twice." Inside, a waiter approached with a phone. "Miss Chun Whitmore, Vogue is on the line about the cover shoot tomorrow. Tell them I'll call back in 5 minutes." I replied without taking my eyes off Ryan. When we were alone again, I allowed myself to smile, truly smile, for the first time in weeks. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said. "I never wanted to take over the company. I just wanted to be seen, to have my contributions acknowledged. And now I have everything I never knew I wanted." I glanced back at the ballroom, where photographers were still capturing every detail of the event I had orchestrated. They wanted me out of the picture. Now the whole frame is mine. Ryan offered his arm. "Shall we give them one more photo? For the new family album?" As we walked back inside, flashbulbs erupted around us. This time, I didn't shrink from the light. I stepped into it, claiming my place at the center of a portrait that was finally completely mine.